Hello, EduMagicians. Welcome to the EduMagic podcast with your host, Dr. Sam Fessich. Dr. Sam is a professor of education, author of EduMagic, and a pumpkin spice latte fan. This podcast is designed for pre-service teachers. Remember, friends, teaching doesn't begin at graduation, but during that first class at 8 a.m. Let's get this party started.
I'm AJ Bianco from Podcast PD, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows in the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Everyone, it's Dr. Sam here, and I'm really excited to be sharing with you 3 mistakes student teachers should not be making this fall. So I hope that you are buckled in. We're ready to go today. Grab a notebook, and we're going to start off with our first mistake. Student teachers, you don't want to make this mistake, and that is always sitting in the back on the first day observing. So it's fine if your desk is in the back of the classroom, but don't stay there the whole time. Don't stay there from 8 to 3 and not interact with kids. You are student teaching. Take a lead in your role and get involved with kids from day one, whether that is greeting them at the door or helping out with grouping students or passing out papers or hanging out at lunch with them and playing at recess. Get involved with students from day one. Don't just sit in the back and observe the whole time. That being said, it is very important to make sure you know proper procedures and routines going on in the classroom that you are a student teacher in. So I know going into student teaching your first day, super nerve-wracking, right? You're like, oh my gosh, what do I even observe? There's so much going on. And you're absolutely right. So please don't go in with just a blank notepad, because that can get a little overwhelming and intense. And instead, go in with a plan. What are specific procedures you're going to observe? What are specific routines you're going to take note of? So as students are walking into the room, take note. What's the procedure there? Where do they turn in their homework? What happens if they're absent? What if they have to go to the restroom or visit the nurse? Make sure that you know those procedures and routines as a student teacher, because you don't want to be in the middle of a lesson later on in your student teaching experience and get interrupted with, I have to go to the bathroom, and you forget what is that procedure. Or if you are kind of in your beginning parts of student teaching, you don't want to interrupt your host teacher teaching to ask them, what's the procedure for going to the bathroom again? So-and-so has to go. So you want to make sure you have routines and procedures down pat. So while you are observing, make sure that you have a clear understanding of different procedures and routines that you are tracking. You might even want to divide your observation paper into morning routine or afternoon routine. You can also do specific procedures listed there too for you to take note of. And that kind of breaks up that huge piece of paper, blank piece of paper, which looks super intimidating. So mistake number 1, don't just hang out in the back on the first day. You want to get involved with students, whether that is in small ways like greeting them at the door, walking around, passing out papers. Maybe you want to have a little intro about yourself. So make sure you're getting involved with students. And then also, when you're observing, observe specific procedures and routines, so you know those whenever you start taking over a few lessons and you don't want to be interrupting your co-op. Number 2, so we talked about don't just sit in the back. Number 2 kind of spins off of this a little bit, having clear expectations. So, the first day, super overwhelming. Maybe after your first day or before your first day, sit down and reflect. What are some of your expectations that you have for yourself during this placement? What are some areas in which you want to grow in? And track that throughout your student teaching experience. So be aware, what are your expectations for yourself in this student teaching placement? Do you want to become more confident with delivering lessons? Do you want to get better at your pacing or your timing or making sure your lessons are challenging for students? Do you want to make sure that you're being a mindful educator and getting to know students throughout your placement? Think about some areas in which you want to grow in throughout your placement. Jot them down in your student teacher planner. Hopefully you got the EduMagic one. It's over on my TPT store. I'll put the link in the notes. But you can grab that there. So make sure that you're tracking your areas of growth, because you're going to grow a lot during student teaching. It's a remarkable experience. But also track your areas in which you are rocketed at, your glows. So what are some things that you really did awesome at during student teaching? And a really fun way to track that is daily. So throughout the day, make it a point to jot down 3 glows that you had. Yes, I feel awesome about that. And maybe a growth area. So that way you're reflecting and you're being purposeful in your reflection. It's personal to you. And it's a little bit more, it can be related to lessons. It can be related to content delivery. It can be related to maybe transitioning from class to class or whatever it might be. But they're more personal to you, those reflection areas. So that's our second mistake, not being clear with expectations, not only for yourself, but now let's share those expectations with our co-op and let our co-op share their expectations for you, the student teacher. So think about what are some ways you can let your co-op know, hey, here's some areas in which I want to grow in during student teaching. Maybe you want to grow in your use of educational technology, or you want to grow in your SEL strategies that you're using. Let them know. And then ask, what are your expectations for me as a student teacher? And ask that question. That way, you're asking it up front. There's no surprises. And then check in with your co-op with how you're doing with that expectation that they have for you. All right. So 2 things. First one, don't just sit in the back all day. You're going to get involved with students. Number 2, share your expectations for yourself and share those expectations with your co-op and ask your co-op what expectations they have for you. You might even want to, as your student teaching experience continues, ask your co-op for specific feedback. Like, for example, if you're doing a lesson like where you're grouping students, if you've never done anything like that before, ask for your co-op to give you feedback on how do you think I did with grouping the students? What changes would you make? What went well? And reflect upon that. So for example, when you're doing your lesson planning, try to ask your co-op for some specific areas and what you're working on in your growth. Okay, the third mistake is just being quiet and not asking questions. Friends, nobody expects you to be perfect during student teaching. Nobody expects you to be perfect during the first year of teaching. All right, let's be real. So you got to ask those questions. You have to ask the questions to your co-op. But you don't want to ask them in like a condescending way. So if your co-op is using a specific technology tool, say they're using Class Dojo to connect with parents, ask them, hey, why did you choose Class Dojo to connect with parents? What are some of the features of the tool that you really enjoy? Instead of saying, why are you using Class Dojo? So you see the difference there? So you're asking and you're being curious, and then reflect on that. Would you want to use Class Dojo? What are some of the features that you enjoyed? Maybe you can even ask to be added for a tech tool like Class Dojo. Maybe you can be added as a teacher or as a student so you can see what it's like. It's kind of cool. So ask those questions to your co-op. Ask questions that you're curious about. For example, ask about, why did you decide to pass out papers in that order? Or what are some ways in which you see your students growing this year? So ask those questions to your co-op. They're more than happy to answer. And if you're a little nervous about asking them throughout the day, if you have a specific reflection time with your co-op, jot them down in your student teacher planner. So whenever it's time to have that reflection with your co-op, you're not just sitting there staring at each other. You can actually have some good conversation about what's going on in the classroom and ask those questions. So let's recap 3 mistakes we don't want to make during student teaching. The first mistake would be just sitting in the back. The second mistake would be not understanding your expectations for yourself. And the third mistake would be not asking questions. So instead, let's flip it around. 3 things we want to do during student teaching. 1, we want to get to know our students from day 1. 2, we want to share those expectations that we have for ourselves, and we want to know what our expectations are from our co-op. And 3, we're going to ask those questions. We're going to jot them down, and we're going to reflect upon our teaching. Friends, I wish you the best of luck during your student teaching experience. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, or compliments, totally drop them down here or you can DM me. Have a great day, and remember, you have the edgy magic within you. Bye for now.
And there you have it, EduMagicians. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share it with your friends. For more EduMagic, check out sfessage.com and follow Dr. Sam on Twitter and Instagram @sfessage. Until next time, you have the EduMagic within you.